Dear colleagues, please take your seats. The meeting has started. Please take your seat. Again, please take your seat, colleagues. We will start our meeting. Good morning, colleagues. Welcome back. I hope you had a good night's rest and are ready to continue our work. This morning, we'll continue our reading of item 5, synthetic biology, followed by item 6, 7, and 4. Before we begin, however, we will hear a report back from one of the co-chairs of the contact group on item 3, which met last night. Ms. Paulina from Chile, you have the floor. Give the floor to Chile. I give the microphone.
Thank you, Chair. Please, 1 second. Okay. Thank you, Chair. My co-chair, Sani Kruit of Netherlands, and I are pleased to report back to you on the progress made last night in the contact group on agenda item 3, planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. And its 2 sub-items, 3A on the global report and 3B on the monitoring framework. The contact group met from 7:30 to 10:30. It garnered much attention and the room was quite full, about 150 participants. We had good discussion on the basis of a set of 4 questions we developed, on which we had seen divergence in the plenary, where around 22 parties took the floor in each question. Mr. Chair, the contact group met with the mandate to look at the entire draft recommendation. On the issue of how to receive the report, welcomes versus endorses or other options, we still see some divergence, and this issue remains in brackets. The group generally felt that more detail could be provided in the draft recommendation on the findings of the report, such as reflecting specific targets that are not tracked as well as the successful ones. Some divergence remain on including more detail on statistics related to key messages, while there was broad support for including important caveats. We heard a general preference to establish an ITEC on the monitoring framework with precise terms of reference. We established a friends of the chair group to take as issues related to monitoring framework with the paragraph related with that decision. The colleagues of this group are Barbara Hegels from Germany and Nitaka Tishidada from South Africa. We also asked the group about how much detail the recommendation should include on the text global report, operationalizing the monitoring framework or strengthening ORT functionality. We heard mixed view on how to tackle these issues, with some thinking that this would be better addressed in a separate decision. Some parties preferred more detail, while others wanted to keep the request general and focus on the issue at COP15. In general, there was an agreement that urgent issues should be addressed on COP17, leaving others for COP18. My co-chair and I are developing a non-paper about these topics. The group would need to meet again to discuss these issues, and the friends of the chair will also need to meet. I thank all delegates for the constructive inputs and strong engagement on this key item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Paulina, and your co-chair, Ms. Sané of the Netherlands, and to all the members of the contact group. Now let's start with our item, the item 5, synthetic biology. Yesterday afternoon, when I closed the list of speakers, we had the following parties and observers remaining: Belarus, India, United Arab Emirates, Haiti, Ghana, Zimbabwe, Panama, South Africa, Bahrain, Peru, Argentina, Russia Federation, Brazil, Namibia, indigenous peoples and local communities, Youth, IUCN, and CBD Alliance. However, before we begin, we would like to give the floor to Kuba. Kuba, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to note that what was broached during Cuba's statement yesterday was motivated because under our legislation, aspects of synthetic biology are addressed as genetically modified organisms by any technique which is not natural. Nevertheless, under the context of the elements which have been provided and been analyzed in this substance, we understand that they should not be fully considered that, because that was already addressed at Subsidiary 27 in Panama. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Kuba.
Thank you, Cuba.
Avant donc de...
Before continuing with the list of speakers that have requested the floor then, I would just like to congratulate you already on the spirit in which we worked yesterday. We made serious progress, even though it was perhaps timid progress. But we have made progress, and I would therefore like to congratulate the countries for this spirit of cooperation. Secondly, when we can save time, let's do so. It's not an obligation to use up all the time available to you. And finally, please go straight to the point. As I was saying yesterday, go to the essentials. In particular, when you think these elements were not covered in your early submissions, then you can add that. In terms of resource mobilization, capacity building, I think we've already heard this a lot. It'll probably come up under every topic, I'm sure. I would perhaps therefore discourage you from coming back to that every time, because it is repeating things and it will always come back up. So perhaps we can be more specific on scientific and technical issues, because it is technical and scientific matters which will require capacity building and which will require the mobilization of financial resources. So once again, I call on your spirit of cooperation so that we can make progress and conclude our work within 1 hour, I hope. Thank you.
We will now continue with the parties that were on the speaking list. As I said in French, I invite all of you to be as concise as possible and to upload the full text of your intervention to the Secretariat no later than 1 hour after close of this session. I remind you that I will be limited intervention to 4 minutes for party speaking on behalf of region, to 2 minutes for individual parties, 3 minutes for IPLCs and major stakeholder group, and 1 minute for non-parties to the convention and other observers, time permitting. Microphones will turn off automatically when the speaking limit has been reached. Okay, now let's start with the first. On my screen, I can recognize Belarus. Belarus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Belarus notes that the area of synthetic biology can be one means, among others, to achieve a number of targets of the GBF. Thus, we support the draft thematic action plan as a useful basis to support capacity building and development, access to and transfer of technology, as well as knowledge sharing in the context of synthetic biology. We think it's important that the proposed indicative actions will be adapted to national conditions, priorities, and needs. We also support the proposed phased approach for effective implementation of the plan, starting with identifying needs and priorities related to scientific research and development, access to and transfer of technology, regulation, assessment, monitoring, knowledge sharing in the area of synthetic biology, and identifying priority actions to meet the identified needs of each specific country. Belarus also stresses the importance of having a complementary approach in implementing this plan, as well as the capacity building action plan of the Cartagena and Nagoya protocols for the countries, the parties of these protocols, as well as identifying and selecting financial resources which will support the thematic action plan in a balanced manner in terms of the specific area of synthetic biology, as well as in terms of building capacity in the area of legislative regulation mechanisms and assessment means, as well as monitoring, oversight, control, and in the area of access to and sharing of the benefits that derive from synthetic biology technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Belarus. Thank you to save time. Now I give the floor to India, followed by United Arab Emirates, and then Haiti. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. India appreciates the Secretariat and ad hoc technical advisory group for advancing work on synthetic biology and welcomes the draft thematic action plan. We recognize the potential of synthetic biology to contribute to the objectives of the convention and implementation of KMBGF. At the same time, its implication must be guided by precautionary approach, the best available multidisciplinary scientific evidence, and national biosafety and regulatory framework. The benefits and risk of synthetic biology should be assessed on a case-by-case basis, taking into account the biodiversity considerations, biosafety, biosecurity, ethical, legal, social, cultural, and socioeconomic conditions, as well as national circumstances. India supports the thematic action plan with great emphasis on the needs of developing and mega-diverse countries through enhanced capacity building, technology transfer on mutually agreed terms, financial support, and South-South cooperation. The plan should also explicitly recognize the role of DSI and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from its utilization consistent with relevant cooptations. We support continued assessment of priority technologies, including environment risk assessment, regulatory oversight, transparency, and long-term ecological implications, while strengthening horizon scanning the foresight activities. Finally, India emphasizes balanced and inclusive participation in future export processes with adequate representation of developing countries, indigenous people and local communities, women, youth, and multidisciplinary experts, and remains committed to science-based, transparent, and precautionary approach to synthetic biology under the convention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. Now I give the floor to United Arab Emirates, followed by Haiti, and then Ghana.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation would like to pay tribute to and thank the group of experts for the work conducted As a result, we have the two documents there presented. For the first paragraph, we support the action plan set out and its voluntary nature, which highlights national capacities. We pay particular importance to capacity building for research and development. On paragraph 5, we note that this is restricted to just a single area. The document sets out the details are still to be developed. So this paragraph seems preliminary in nature and should be developed further. Thirdly, while choosing to work more, we also need to consider and emphasize other relevant areas. This includes that which has been raised as examples. Here we would like to call for consistent drafting on paragraph 6, which we welcome, calls to widen representation in order to ensure coherence and integrity of geographical distribution in the composition of the team. Thank you.
Thank you, United Arab Emirates, for saving time. Now I give the floor to Haïti, followed by Ghana and then Zimbabwe. Haïti, vous avez la parole.
Haiti, you have the floor.
Je constate que Haïti.
I note that Haiti is not in the room. We will continue with Ghana. You have the floor, followed by Zimbabwe and then Panama.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, Ghana supports Kenya on behalf of Africa. Chair, synthetic biology can solve biodiversity challenges, but this requires a balanced approach, the integration of high-quality, multidisciplinary scientific evidence, transparency and a systematic assessment of both potential benefits and risk, including uncertainties and adverse impacts, aligned with the precautionary approach, are critical for sustainable use of synthetic biology. To support credible evidence-based implementation, as highlighted in the draft decision, it is essential to strengthen national capacities for independent assessments, biosafety, monitoring, and informed decision-making. This process should recognize relevant traditional and local knowledge, ensuring meaningful, inclusive participation from indigenous peoples, local communities, and women. We support the call for the implementation of the thematic action plan and equitable sharing of knowledge to advance implementation. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ghana. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Panama, and then South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe supports the statement made by Kenya on behalf of the African group yesterday. Zimbabwe also acknowledges the work of the ad hoc technical expert group on synthetic biology. We note with concern the limited participation of African region in the synthetic biology, while other regions already have products on the market. Recognizing the synthetic biology is an important technology for achieving the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Zimbabwe supports the endorsement of the thematic action plan on capacity building and development, access to and transfer of technology, and knowledge sharing in the context of synthetic biology. The action plan should prioritize strengthening research, development, innovation, and technology transfer to build Africa's capacity. Its successful implementation will require predictable, adequate, and sustainable financial support. Zimbabwe further emphasizes that the positive and negative impacts of synthetic biology should be assessed on case-by-case basis. Zimbabwe also calls for the rollout of the thematic action plan through the regional technical support centers, recognizing their critical role in strengthening national capacity and fostering regional collaboration. Finally, given the urgent need to implement the thematic action plan, Zimbabwe believes that available resources should be directed towards its implementation. We therefore do not support the establishment of a new ad hoc technical support group at this stage. Instead, further technical discussions can continue through the open-ended online forum on synthetic biology. We shall submit our text on some proposals. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Now I give the floor to Panama, followed by South Africa, and then Bahrain.
Thank you very much, Chair. Panama will be direct in its remarks. We don't understand the reason for which we insist in moving towards creating new ATEG on synthetic biology. This mechanism has received a mandate on at least 2 prior occasions, and both times has failed to fulfill it. Repeating for a 3rd time a process which has already failed twice is not a responsible use of the resources of this convention. Second, synthetic biology is fully within the mandate of the Cartagena Protocol. The work of this ATEG duplicates, unambiguously, what has already been conducted within this context. It's not the only duplication. The assessment of synthetic biology or development of synthetic biology with IA has also been addressed in a wide-ranging, robust manner within the OECD. Continuing along this path is to reproduce within the convention something which other multilateral fora has already resolved. Fourth, we need to be honest on priorities. We are facing a real scarcity of resources. This area, and not another, is where we need to concentrate our efforts. Every resource which we direct to creating new parallel spaces is a resource which we are not investing in the effective implementation which developing countries need. For these reasons, Panama does not support the establishment of a new ATEG. We propose that Substa recommends to COP17 consolidating existing results through the Secretariat, concentrating work on the implementation of the thematic action plan, and supporting mechanisms which the Convention and its protocols already offer, rather than opening yet another process. Thank you very much, Chair.
Gracias,
Thank you, Panama.
Now I give the floor to South Africa, followed by Bahrain, and then Peru.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa is in support of the statement made by Kenya on behalf of the African group. Firstly, South Africa would like to appreciate all the work undertaken in line of COP 1621 decision on synthetic biology. Chair, South Africa is of the view that the thematic action plan should remain focused on the proposed activities to be delivered. We view that this reflects a submission that parties are in line with through the various processes. In our respective interventions and submitted text proposal, our strong view and emphasis is on the efforts to allocate resources for implementation for the thematic action plan. We also believe that the thematic action plan should somehow remain flexible to accommodate change, given that synthetic biology remains a rapidly evolving technology. Chair, we are aware that the various processes undertaken for the thematic action plan would not satisfy all parties. But for the first time, we have a very strong thematic action plan that needs to be implemented. We also note the current work done by the ATEG, which forms a good basis for this work carrying forward. However, most of these activities must still be driven by the parties when it comes to strengthening their capacity for an independent assessment, monitoring, and regulation of synthetic biology in applications where risk remains a concern in uncertainties, followed by socioeconomic considerations and governance. In closing, Chair, South Africa continues to support this process of the thematic action plan and will be participating in various processes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Thank you for time saving. Now I give the floor to Bahrain, followed by Peru, and then Russia Federation. Bahrain, you have the floor.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. نتقدم بداية بالشكر الجزيل إلى الأمانة وفريق الخبراء التقنيين المخصص على العمل.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the team that developed this work First and foremost, we'd like to align ourselves with the statement made by Egypt on this point. First, the document takes into account local communities and indigenous peoples, but it doesn't take into account traditional and religious values when we apply synthetic biology, when it comes to, for example, technical and genetic changes. They have a different value in different societies. We need to have a message in terms of respecting religious and cultural systems of different societies in the guidelines for this activity, as has been the case in a number of different international organizations. We welcome the action plan for capacity building, transfer of technology, and knowledge sharing. Countries like Bahrain need a great deal of assistance in order to participate fully in this type of work. When it comes to benefits, such as reducing pollution, we see that there are advantages when it comes to using this type of biology in areas such as the Gulf. When it comes to the working group, ensuring regional and geographical representation that is fair and equitable is very important. The microphone has been cut off.
Thank you, Bahrain. Now I give the floor to Peru, followed by Russia Federation, and then Argentina. Peru, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take this opportunity to move things along, so we've decided not to make an oral statement. Thank you.
Gracias a Perú.
Thank you, Peru.
Tiene
That's very valuable. Thank you.
Russia, you have the floor, followed by Argentina and then Namibia.
Distinguished Chair, distinguished colleagues, the Russian delegation thanks the Secretariat for preparing the documents on synthetic biology, the compilation of the outcomes of the work of the ad hoc technical expert group, and the draft thematic action plan. We recognize the considerable potential of synthetic biology for healthcare, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and the environment. However, of priority attention for us is biosafety. Any use of such technology must be based on the precautionary principle, with an required preliminary risk assessment for biodiversity and human health. Russia has consistently expressed itself in favor of ensuring that biosafety measures be an integral part of any national action plan in this area, which is enshrined in our country at the legislative level. We support the development of the thematic plan, but we consider that it should clearly set out regulatory mechanisms, control over transboundary movements of organisms, and mechanisms for rapid response to unforeseen consequences. Of particularly importance are the needs of developing countries in creating and building potential for safe use of synthetic organisms. The work of the ad hoc technical expert group must continue on a regular basis in order to have timely tracking of technological breakthroughs and to correct biosecurity measures. Russia is prepared to share our experience in this area and to participate constructively in developing recommendations for the 17th session of the Conference of the Parties. We trust that the final document will enshrine biosafety as a key principle and will ensure responsible development of synthetic biology. The proposed Russian amendments for Substa/28/4 and Substa/28/4/add1 have been sent to the Secretariat. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Russia. Thank you to save time. Yeah, now I give the floor to Argentina, then Namibia.
Thank you, Chair. Argentina thanks the Secretariat and the ATEC for all the work they've done to develop these documents. Likewise, we recognize the growing interest in synthetic biology for the implementation of the convention, and we welcome the efforts made to build capacity, facilitate access to and transfer of technology, However, we consider that the development of this work must continue to be focused on the mandate agreed upon by the parties. Decision number 1621 states that the action plan must seek to achieve the goals of the convention. We feel its implementation's main goal must be target 17 of the GBF. This is the one that has to do with biotechnology and its safety and the management of its benefits. Thus, Argentina feels that the action plan should be a guiding document providing support to build capacities and ensure access to and transfer of technology and knowledge sharing, avoiding turning this into a document that will create new obligations or monitoring mechanisms or prescriptive references for parties. Likewise, we feel it would be appropriate to avoid having two specific definitions of synthetic biology that could be identified as priorities for the GBF. When that context is constantly evolving, it requires proportional approaches based on scientific evidence and a case-by-case evaluation. Likewise, we feel that at this stage, it's not necessary to establish a new ATEC. Existing mechanisms under the convention, including various open-ended fora, are the appropriate place to continue this work with proper use of resources and prioritizing implementation, capacity building, and making use of what's already been achieved. Rather than creating new structures, it's good to have a full assessment of what has already been achieved, integrating lessons learned and achievements and possible overlaps, as that otherwise it would require an additional technical analysis. Finally, we highlight that any action in this area must avoid duplications and must have appropriate implementation means. We will be in, the microphone has been cut off.
Thank you, Argentina. Now I give the floor to Namibia. Namibia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Namibia aligned itself with a statement made by Kenya on behalf of the African group yesterday. Namibia recognized that synthetic biology has the potential to contribute positively to socio-economic advancement. Namibia further welcomes the adoption of the thematic action plan to support capacity building and development, access and transfer of technology and knowledge sharing for SynBio. Chair, Namibia is currently revising its national biosafety systems with the overall aim to address emerging technologies, including synthetic biology. Therefore, Namibia encourages adequate financial resources through appropriate financial instruments aimed at capacity building in areas where capacity building and development, as well as access and transfer of technology and knowledge sharing are needed for research and development. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Namibia, for saving time. Thank you, colleagues. The delegates, we will now hear from observers. Regarding the statement submitted by observers, I will go through the list on the screen one by one. Note Okay, thank you. Now I give the floor to IPLCs, followed by youth, and then ICN. IPLCs, you have the floor.
I'm speaking on the behalf of International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. Species are sacred to indigenous peoples and local community, through which we maintain our connection with the nature. The interaction of synthetic organisms with the native species are not well known and may adversely impact our culturally significant species, ecosystem, traditional knowledge. There must be free power informed consent and the use of the precautionary principle in the application of synthetic biology that affect us. In the preamble paragraph, mention both positive and negative impacts but the elements only focus on the technology and does not include the assessment of the socio-economic and cultural impact on synthetic biology on the indigenous peoples and local community and relevant stakeholders. IIB recommend including those elements in Preamble 5. This aligns with the objective of the CBD, particularly Article 8J and the Convention and Article 26 of the Cartagena Protocol. IIB support the contribution of the ethics and synthetic biology with the expanded membership of considering the gender balance and incorporation of representative indigenous peoples and local community from 7 socio-economic regions. Regarding the potential benefit of synthetic biology in relation to the KMGBF, IIB suggests adding to the target 1, while respecting the rights of indigenous peoples and local community. Target 20 should promote the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local community to include culturally appropriate capacity building and development on synthetic biology. Potential impact of synthetic biology should be considered in the relevant target such as the DSI. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, IPLCs. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to youth, followed by IUCN and then CBD Alliance.
Thank you, Chair. We are speaking on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, which serves as the international coordinating platform for youth participation in the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have submitted specific text proposals for this agenda item online, and we thank the parties who have expressed their support for these proposals. We are taking the floor to briefly outline our general key priorities as youth for this agenda item. Gibbon welcomes the thematic action plan while raising several major concerns that have been included in our early submissions. Gibbon also welcomes the outcomes of the ACTEC report. While the report examines the potential benefits of synthetic biology, several of these proposed benefits warrant closer scrutiny. The report also appropriately identifies priority areas related to recent technological developments, given the growing uncertainty and the absence of clear legislative and regulatory frameworks. Gibbon supports the establishment of a future ACTEC and emphasizes that it should adopt an agile process to assess the potential impacts of recent technological developments, as well as continue the anticipatory approaches, including horizon scanning and monitoring mechanisms to support the timely identification and assessment of emerging developments in synthetic biology. The ACTEC should ensure the gender balance and the representation of indigenous peoples, local communities, women, and youth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, youth. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to IUCN, followed by CBD Alliance. IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, delegates. At the IUCN World Conservation Congress in Abu Dhabi last year, IUCN members adopted an IUCN policy on synthetic biology in relation to nature conservation as a framework for decision-making emerging from a worldwide, inclusive, and participatory policy development process. This process included close cooperation with deliberations on the subject under the CBD. In adopting the policy, IUCN invited CBD parties to take the IUCN policy into account when considering synthetic biology. IUCN therefore welcomes the reference to the policy in the report of the CBD Synthetic Biology ATEG and in the thematic action plan, and supports the recommendation from Subsidiary 28 to COP17 to adopt the thematic action plan accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, ICN. Thank you for saving time. Now, I give the floor to CBD Alliance. CBD Alliance, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair and esteemed colleagues. The CBD Alliance would like to emphasize the importance of applying the precautionary approach to the development and use of synthetic biology to safeguard biodiversity and human well-being. To support this objective, technology transfer capacity building, and development must include assessment, regulations, and governance. Would also like to emphasize the continued importance of horizon scanning and technology monitoring to ensure that governance frameworks keep pace with technological developments and that biodiversity conservation remains the primary objective. Attention should be given to strengthening the capacity of developing countries to assess potential adverse impacts. We would thus like to ask parties to support the following proposals. Paragraph 2 needs additional language, emphasizing the need for horizon scanning, assessment, monitoring, governance, and regulation of synthetic biology. Technology development and use should not rely on hypothetical claims of potential benefits. In paragraph 3 and 4, references to specific benefits of synthetic biology applications should be deleted because the examples are not based on the results of an assessment and require further verification. Paragraph 5 should include new text recognizing the horizon scanning and monitoring will help identify realistic applications and any potential negative and positive impacts of synthetic biology developments. Lastly, we recommend a new paragraph 10F, amending decisions 1433 and 1626 about conflict of interest to also apply to consultants. I invite parties to also support the CBDA's specific text recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CBDA Alliance. Thank you for saving time. Thank you, colleagues. Now I ask parties who can support the statement made by CBD Alliance. Any parties? I can recognize Finland, Grenada, and Egypt. Thank you. The colleagues, now I want to submit the statement made by ICN to be supported by parties. Any parties would like to support ICN statement? I see Australia, Egypt, Ghana, and the rest, the Secretariat can report. And I think that we, in time constraint, we can save time. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. We have completed the first reading of Agenda Item 5, Synthetic Biology. Distinguished delegates, I have taken note of the extensive discussion on this matter. It is clear that the subsidiary body will need to undertake further consideration of the draft recommendation to COP17. Accordingly, I will establish a contact group to work on the thematic action plan and the draft recommendation. I have requested Ms. Marta of Namibia and Ms. Valeria of Italy to serve as co-chairs of this contact group. Details regarding the timing, venue, and organization of the group's work will be communicated in due course. As a kind reminder, the implementation elements related to the thematic action plan will be discussed next week at the subsidiary body on implementation. I thank you in advance for your understanding. I will proceed to prepare a non-paper with the assistance of the Secretariat. in line with established practice. The non-papers are not intended to be a compilation of all proposals. Instead, they will contain my proposal for consensus text and aimed at facilitate a more efficient negotiation. Thank you, colleagues. Now we can move to the next item, item 6. Dear colleagues, before we move to the next item, I would like to give the floor to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, we have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. شكرا سيادة.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia believes that synthetic biology is a scientific revolution that requires a framework that respects sovereignty and guarantees sharing of benefits. In this context, we see that genetic resources is not a public ownership. It should be subject to prior agreement. It should require consensus. So we do not want this kind of agreement without guarantees.
Please, just to be clear, when I close the floor to the speakers, please, I can't allow to give again the floor to the parties. Please, I call your indulgence, but I can't continue because my list was closed yesterday before the observers taken the floor. Please.
That was not the case, excuse me. We signaled to you before you closed, but you overlooked our statements. So we have, it's our right to say it.
Collègue de l'Arabie Saoudite.
Dear colleague from Saudi Arabia, I really ask for your indulgence. Yesterday, the list was already closed, and I had said out loud, I believe, that the list was closed. And based on that, I then allowed the observers to take the floor because I can't give the floor to a party after the observers. I consider that once the list of parties is closed, then we can hear from the observers. If we hear from the observers, that assumes that there are no more parties wishing for the floor. So I really ask for your indulgence. I understand that it's necessary for you to take the floor now, but please believe me, we have serious issues with time. I'm really asking for your indulgence here. So, distinguished delegate from Saudi Arabia, I do ask for your indulgence here. If possible, can we move on to the next item?
Merci.
Thank you for your understanding.
We can move to the next item. Item 6, Sustainable Wildlife Management. Dear colleagues, we will now turn our attention to item 6 of our agenda, Sustainable Wildlife Management. I invite the Secretariat to introduce this item. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. For the item on sustainable wildlife management, we have prepared document CBD SBSTTA-28/5/Reb1 on sustainable wildlife management. It contains information related to the development of global guidance on the sustainable management of wildlife applicable to multiple species and to multiple practices. The document presents a draft recommendation for the consideration of the subsidiary body. The document is complemented by the following information documents. Information document 5, which outlines the review and analysis informing the development of the draft global guidance, including the analysis of the submissions received, the outcomes of the expert meeting, and the peer review process. And information document 6, which provides a synthesis of best practices submitted in response to notification 2515. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Information document 10 lists the 21 submissions received from parties and the 6 statements from observers on item 6 by the deadline. Given that these modalities were intending to save time, the parties and observers listed may wish to refrain from delivering an oral statement. Parties and observers that did not submit early statement may wish to request the floor and submit their written statement as per established procedures. Colleagues, as you know, statements submitted during the early submission process were made on a voluntary and informal basis. Are there any objections from any parties or observers listed in the information document to your statement being formally entered on record as statement officially submitted for this agenda item in this meeting? Please raise your hands if you have any objection. I see no hands. Thank you, colleagues. Your statement will be formally entered on record and considered as officially submitted under this agenda item. Regarding the statements submitted by observers, I will go through the list on the screen one by one. Note that this list only includes observers that have registered on site. As I read the list, I will ask the representative of the observer organization to raise their hand so that we can confirm that you are in the room. I will then ask parties to press the microphone button if they support the statement made by that observer. I will read out the first 3 parties' names from the speakers list, and the Secretariat will capture the entire list and make it available on the meeting website as soon as possible after the end of the session. I can recognize DRC. DRC, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. It seems that you went a bit too quickly because DRC indeed wanted to update its statements when you gave us the floor. Thank you.
Si le distingué.
Perhaps the distinguished delegate from the DRC could repeat that. I didn't fully understand.
Ouais.
I was saying that you went a bit too quickly. The Democratic Republic of the Congo would like to update its statement under this agenda item. So when you give us the floor, we will read out our updated statement. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you to the distinguished delegate from DRC. Well, I don't think I've gone very fast. On the contrary, we're first considering statements made by observers. Once these statements are examined and submitted for support from the states parties, we will approve that and say that they will be supported to make the statement later, and then we will open discussions on agenda item 6. When discussions on agenda item 6 will be opened, then the DRC will be very strongly part of that list, as if you ask for the floor, of course. So thank you very much for your understanding. I will now ask for the list of the observers to be shown. We have that list here. We will go through each observer one by one, and I will ask for support from the countries. I will start with the CMS Secretariat. CMS Secretariat, are they in the room? Yes, they are. Are there countries that wish to support the statements made by CMS Secretariat? Okay, I see that there are countries supporting the statement. As I have mentioned previously, to save time, we won't read out each and every country. I will just read out the first 3, but for the rest, the Secretariat will take note. I can see Sweden, France, and Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you for the support. And the others will be noted down by the Secretariat.
On my screen, Echo Mexi, you are present in the room. Okay, thank you. Any parties to support? I can recognize Guinea, Morocco, Cameroon. The rest, Secretariat, please report. Now I go to the next, Fungi Foundation. Fungi Foundation, are you present? Okay, thank you. Any support? I can recognize Chile, Panama, Spain. The rest, Secretariat, please report. The next, Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Are you okay? Thank you. Any support? Gambia, United Kingdom, Egypt, the rest, please report. The next one, International Indigenous Forum, are you here? Okay, thank you. Any support? Côte d'Ivoire, Panama, Marshall Islands, and the rest, report, please. The last, CITES Secretariat. Okay, you are here. Thank you. Any support? I can recognize Fiji, Canada, Spain. The rest, please report. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. I will now open the floor for intervention on item 6. Beginning with parties speaking on behalf of a regional group. Please request the floor now, only if you are speaking on behalf of a regional group. I would like to repeat. Please request the floor now, only if you are speaking on behalf of a regional group. I remind you that I will be limited intervention to 4 minutes for parties speaking on behalf of regions, 2 minutes for individual parties, 3 minutes for IPLCs and major stakeholders groups, and 1 minute for non-parties to the convention and other observers, time permitting. Microphones will turn off automatically when the speaking limit has been reached. I will close the list of speakers as needed, but will give fair warning before I do so. Following intervention by observer, I will give a brief change for parties that may wish to comment on or support any specific proposal made by these organizations. Please upload your written comment no later than 1 hour after close of the session. Currently, the floor is only to the parties speaking on behalf of the group only. If not so, please close your microphone. Okay, I can recognize Zimbabwe. I give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Marshall Island, and then Brazil. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe is speaking on behalf of the Africa Group. We would like to express our appreciation to the Secretariat for preparing the first draft and organizing a meeting of experts earlier this year to shape the document further, producing a comprehensive and inclusive draft global guidance document. The draft effectively recognizes the diversity of species, ecosystems, and addresses ecosystem integrity, transboundary considerations, and demonstrates strong alignment with the goals and targets of KMGBF. The inclusion of 13 African case studies on sustainable wildlife management is welcome, as this provides a valuable practical experience that can support knowledge exchange and practical guidance to facilitate implementation efforts. Africa supports the adoption of the guidance subject to further consideration of our observations for improvement. First, the greater emphasis should be placed on the contribution of sustainable wildlife management, wildlife-based socioeconomic development, and the preservation and enhancement of local cultural practices, values, and norms. Second, capacity building for human-wildlife conflict management appears insufficiently reflected in the recommendations. In this regard, the guidance could benefit from stronger references to mitigation strategies, including spatial or land use planning and sustainable agriculture practices that help reduce conflicts between people and wildlife. Third, articulated as important components of sustainable wildlife management. We further note importance of strengthening integration of traditional knowledge systems with conventional scientific knowledge, ensuring that the role of private sector and other relevant actors is adequately recognized in implementation efforts. Africa places a lot of value on tailoring specific approaches to actual practices in different domains. We also appreciate the rights and recognition, equitable distribution of costs and benefits, and the need to extend context-specific guidance depending on national circumstances, priorities, and available resources, governance systems, and ensuring flexibility and applicability across the different contexts. We would also like to suggest careful consideration of certain terms used in the draft global guidance, as different parties may interpret them differently. In this regard, the inclusion of a glossary of terms could enhance clarity and reduce ambiguity whilst promoting a shared understanding that will also be useful for monitoring framework and documentation of best practices. Finally, Chair, Africa has made some specific text amendments that we are submitting with our statement, and we look forward to engaging further if a contact group is created to refine this guidance. Asante sana.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, on behalf of Africa, and thank you for time saving. Now I give the floor to Marshall Islands.
Thank you, Chair. The Republic of the Marshall Islands speaks for the 14 Pacific Island developing states. We support the adoption of the draft global guidance on sustainable wildlife management. Its foundations are the right ones: participatory and rights-based decision-making, respect for multiple knowledge systems, and the equitable sharing of costs and benefits. These are not abstract principles to us. They describe how our communities have managed wild species for generations. The global report scores sustainable use under Target 5 at 0.67, among the stronger results in the whole framework. But it is candid that evidence remains insufficient to assess it fully, and that preventing pathogen spillover is a gap. Target 9 on the benefits of wild species to people scores 0.42, with the elements relating to Indigenous peoples and local communities less well covered. That pattern is familiar. The human and community dimensions are the least measured. Across the Pacific, customary marine tenure and locally managed marine areas are living models of exactly the community-based, rights-based sustainable use that this guidance promotes. Our communities set seasonal closures, protect spawning grounds, and revive traditional practices that sustain both biodiversity and livelihoods. We offer this not as folklore, but as best practice, evidence that rights-based, community-led management works. We ask for three things. First, that the guidance and the indicators for targets 5 and 9 come with the capacity and finance for SIDS to monitor harvest, trade, and benefits. We cannot report what we are not resourced to measure. Second, that coordination with the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, the Convention on Migratory Species, and the Food and Agriculture Organization strengthen implementation rather than duplicate it. Small delegations cannot service overlapping processes. Coherence across these bodies is, for us, a practical measure, a practical necessity, not a preference. Third, that the guidance keep the rights and roles of Indigenous peoples and local communities central, with free, prior, and informed consent, and with benefits flowing genuinely to the communities who steward these species. Our priorities in this area are primarily marine, the sustainable use of reef and coastal species on which our food security depends and the drivers of their decline. Above all, overexploitation and invasive alien species. We ask that the guidance be usable in an ocean context and that it recognize the particular pressures on small island fisheries. Chair, sustainable use done well is not a threat to biodiversity. It is one of our oldest tools for conserving it. The Pacific has practiced it for millennia. We ask this body to adopt guidance that honors that practice along with the principles and values. Resource it and let's flourish. Komultata.
Thank you, Marshall Island. Thank you to save the time. Now I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I'm delivering this statement on behalf of Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Panama, and Uruguay. We thank the Secretariat, the Collaborative Partnership on Sustainable Wildlife Management, and all experts and contributors involved in preparing the draft global guidance. We support its adoption as an important contribution to the implementation of the Convention and the achievement of the relevant targets of the KMGBF, in particular targets 5 and 9. Our countries welcome the recognition that sustainable wildlife management must be adapted to national and local circumstances, supported by inclusive and participatory governance, and informed by scientific, indigenous, and local knowledge. We also underscore the importance of safeguarding customary sustainable use, respecting the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, and ensuring the fair and equitable sharing of costs and benefits arising from wildlife management. We also consider sustainable wildlife management an important component of a broader agenda on the sustainable use of biodiversity. Sustainable use is one of the three objectives of the Convention, yet it remains comparatively underdeveloped in its program of work. Our countries have welcomed Brazil's Information Document 12 entitled Towards a Program of Work on the Sustainable Use of Biodiversity. The proposal seeks to connect the work on wild species with other dimensions of sustainable use, including customary sustainable use, biodiversity-based value chains, genetic resources, traditional knowledge, benefit sharing, bioeconomy, circular economy, biotrade, and sustainable biodiversity-based activities, the sustainable use and conservation of wild fungi, products and services that enhance biodiversity. We therefore propose that this recommendation initiate an inclusive and party-driven consultation process, diversity-related agreements, on options for a possible program of work on the sustainable use of biodiversity. This process should build on the Addis Ababa principles and guidelines, on relevant decisions of the Conference of the Parties, and on the present global guidance, including the Global Action Plan on Biodiversity and Health, while preserving the specific mandate on sustainable wildlife management and avoiding duplication with existing work under the Convention. The outcome of the consultations should be considered by Substa before COP18, with a view to the possible establishment of this program of work by the Conference of the Parties at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Thank you for time saving. Please, did you take the floor on behalf of the group or as individual party?
Party.
Okay, if so, if you take the floor as party, let's give me the chance to introduce all parties. If there are no more parties speaking on behalf of a regional group, I will open the floor for parties, followed by observer. Now the floor is open for the individual parties. I will take the first intervention from Uganda, followed by Kenya, and then Ghana. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Uganda supports the statement that was made by Zimbabwe on behalf of Africa. And we also support the draft recommendations that are contained in this document, Chair. Chair, we just have some additional text would like to be included in the draft recommendation 2, 3, and 4. In 2, line 4, we propose to add national development plans. And in paragraph 3, we propose to add at the end of that, and sectors that impact negatively on wildlife. And then in paragraph 4, the fourth line, Chair, we propose to add support for IPLCs, youth, and community initiatives. Thank you, Chair. This text is it's already uploaded, and we have indicated where those additions can be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Uganda. Thank you for time saving. Now I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Ghana, and then Egypt.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya supports the statement made by the African Group. Kenya welcomes the adoption of the Global Voluntary Guideline on the sustainable management of wildlife for application based on national circumstances. To strengthen the operationalization of this guideline, Kenya urges parties to integrate sustainable management principles directly into their national policies, legislations, and NBSAPs in strict alignment with KMGBF targets. This must be backed by a clear monitoring framework and targeted financial mechanism from GEF and other donors. Kenya emphasizes the critical need for regional, sub-regional, and global partnership to address the transboundary sustainable wildlife management. Finally, Kenya requests the inclusion of the following two critical pillars within the guideline. The first pillar, human-wildlife conflict, a strong emphasis on addressing human-wildlife conflict as a primary obstacle to sustainable management, promoting the use of non-lethal deterrents and community-based compensation mechanisms. Two, institutional governance, strengthened framework that actively promote transparency, accountability, and equitable benefit sharing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Ghana, followed by Egypt, and then Bangladesh.
Thank you, Chair. Ghana supports Zimbabwe on behalf of Africa. Sustainable wildlife management must be implemented consistent with targets 22 and 23 of the KMGBF, grounded in the best available scientific evidence, complemented by indigenous peoples and local communities' traditional knowledge with their full and effective participation in decision-making processes. This requires creating enabling conditions for equitable and meaningful inclusive governance, addressing structural barriers, and ensuring that the benefits derived from wildlife conservation and sustainable use are shared fairly. We support the draft decisions and the voluntary guidelines. We underscore the importance of integrating sustainable wildlife management into national biodiversity strategies and action plans, land use planning, and broader sustainable development policies, ensuring coherence across sectors such as agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and tourism, enhancing monitoring and enforcement, and promoting community-based conservation approaches that generate equitable social and economic benefits are necessary elements for implementation. Capacity building, technology transfer, and adequate, predictable, and accessible financial resources remain essential to support effective implementation. I thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Ghana. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Egypt, followed by Bangladesh, and then India. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Egypt supports statement giving on behalf of Africa. Sustainable wildlife management represents an essential component of implementation of GBF, contributing to biodiversity conservation, ecosystem integrity, food security, sustainable livelihood, and human well-being. Effective wildlife management requires integrated landscape and ecosystem approaches that address habitat conservation, ecological connectivity, restoration, invasive alien species, climate change adaptation, and community participation. Egypt has already made significant effort, taking into consideration many of the issues that are already presented to us, including expanding protected areas, restoring critical ecosystems, strengthening monitoring ecosystems, and so on. Egypt wishes to emphasize the importance of strengthening capacity building and technology transfer, improving access to financial resources, strengthening cooperation among biodiversity-related conventions. Finally, Egypt supports continuation of scientific and technological work on scientific wildlife management and encourages the development of practical guidance that assists parties to implementation of GBF with all national priorities and capacities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci à l'Égypte pour le temps.
Thank you, Egypt, for the time saved. Now, dear colleagues, I will soon close the list of speakers who wish to take the floor. It's a time now then to be added, because when I close the list, there will no longer be the possibility of reopening it. Thank you for your understanding on this.
To Bangladesh, followed by India and then Saudi Arabia. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Having submitted Bangladesh's detailed statement earlier, I would like to briefly highlight a few key elements that could strengthen the text and support its effective implementation. First, we propose explicit recognition of habitat loss, fragmentation, as these undermine ecological connectivity, restrict wildlife movement, and increase species vulnerability. Second, effective implementation requires stronger technical, scientific, and institutional capacities supported by capacity building, technology transfer, and technical cooperation for developing country parties. Bangladesh also supports integration, biodiversity mainstreaming into policy coherence, consistent with Target 14 of the KMGBF. As a climate vulnerable country, we emphasize ecosystem-based adaptation, nature-based solution, co-management approaches, and citizen science. Finally, human-wildlife conflict should address loss of life, injuries, crop damage, and livestock depredation, enabling effective mitigation and compensation measures. Bangladesh remains committed to practical, inclusive, and adequately supported guidance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to India, followed by Saudi Arabia, and then Costa Rica.
Thank you, Chair. India appreciates the Secretariat and collaborative partnership on wildlife management for preparing the draft global guidance. India supports the development of voluntary science-based and flexible guidance to assist parties in implementing the KMGBF in accordance with the national circumstance, priorities, legislations, and capacities. We also recognize that the guidance contributes to the implementation of KMBGF Target 3, 11, and 14, among other relevant targets. We emphasize that the guidance should remain voluntary and that any information on its implementation should be submitted through the national focal points, fully respecting the sovereign rights of the party under the convention. Implementation to take into account ecologically and socio-economic condition, financial capacities, cultural diversities, and government systems, while recognizing the important role of rural landscapes in biodiversity conservation. India considers that the section on cross-cutting policy coherence and cross-sectoral integration requires further deliberation among parties before its finalization. Given the growing global significance of human-wildlife conflict, India believes that the convention may consider inviting IBIS to take a global assessment on human-wildlife conflict and species-specific mitigation measures to strengthen the scientific base for policy and management. Finally, India encourages SBSTTA-28 and COP17 to recognize the transboundary collaboration, conservation initiatives as effective mechanism for sustainable management. Regional initiatives, including Kanchenjunga Landscape, ICIMOD-led program in the Hindu Kush Himalayas, Bay of Bengal program, Project Cheetah, regional tiger conservation efforts demonstrate the value of international cooperation. India remains committed to work consistently with all the parties to finalize balanced practice.
Thank you, India. Before I give the floor to Saudi Arabia, just to remind you that, as I said earlier, colleagues, the list of speakers is now closed. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Saudi Arabia, followed by Costa Rica, and then South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We welcome the draft global guidance for the sustainable management of wildlife. We reiterate that sustainable use is a key pillar of the CBD. Wildlife is an important source of livelihoods and food, mainly for local communities and rural society. This is why the guidance must be implemented in accordance with national rules and regulations. This must not lead to undue restrictions on legal and sustainable practices. We underscore the importance of respecting local knowledge and sustainable practices in accordance with national legislation. On the One Health approach, We support its implementation because it's a cooperative approach, but it must not be used to impose undue trade or commercial restrictions or to create additional financial obligations. It must go hand in hand with the capacity building and the availability of resources. Further coordination must be strengthened with relevant organizations in order to avoid reporting obligations and restrictions. We must take advantage of current information available. The implementation of the guidance must not lead to new reporting obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia, for saving time. Now I give the floor to Costa Rica, followed by South Africa, and then Indonesia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Thank you, Chair. Costa Rica welcomes the presentation of this document on sustainable wildlife management. The text has a cross-cutting approach complementing existing tools like the CBD and other multilateral environmental agreements. We particularly appreciate the fact that the document goes beyond the traditional approach centered only on use of species. Rather, it provides an integrated vision that includes essential elements like good governance, participation, respect for rights, scientific knowledge, and traditional knowledge. Although the document is robust, in Costa Rica's opinion, there is still room for improvement. In particular, we feel it would be useful to have greater clarity on the One Health approach, recognizing the interlinkages between human, animal, and ecosystem health. We'd also suggest strengthening the guidance on preventing negative interactions between humans and wildlife through territorial planning, infrastructure design that is environmentally friendly, and risk management. Thank you.
Gracias, Costa.
Thank you, Costa Rica. Thank you for saving us time.
Before I give the floor to South Africa, please allow me to remind the parties on my screen. I have South Africa, Indonesia, DRC, Gabon, Guatemala, Syria, Russia Federation, Tanzania, Burundi, Bahrain, China, Peru, Ireland, Panama, Botswana. And in terms of observer, I have IPCs, youth, and IUCN. Thank you. Now the floor is yours, South Africa.
Thank you very much, Chair. South Africa supports the intervention made by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa Group. South Africa reaffirms the importance of promoting sustainable wildlife economies, ensuring equitable benefit sharing, recognizing the differentiated costs associated with conservation and sustainable use, and providing appropriate support to vulnerable communities. These priorities are closely aligned with South Africa's national policies and strategies, and they are also consistent with the objectives of the SADC wildlife-based economy strategy. It is important to acknowledge that the draft global guidance could be strengthened by giving greater attention to the development of inclusive wildlife economies, investment readiness, biodiversity finance, natural capital accounting, enterprise and value chain development, institutional strengthening and measurable socio-economic outcomes, looking at how parties should operationalize, finance, measure, and institutionalize sustainable wildlife economies. Additional guidance is required on how the benefit sharing arrangements contained in the draft guidance are developed and by whom, mindful of the Nagoya Protocol on ABS principles. This is a cautious recommendation because IPLCs may be incentivized to accept measures they would otherwise oppose, simply because benefits are anticipated. The guidance should ensure that benefit sharing arrangements do not compromise the voluntary character of free prior informed consent. Finally, Chair, safeguards in a form of sustainability standards and certification schemes have been referenced in the other work of the CBD. For example, Decision 14.7, paragraph 22.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia takes note to continued work on the global guidance for sustainable wildlife management and recognizes its potential contribution to more effective, inclusive, and science-based wildlife species policies. First, the guidance should provide a more comprehensive understanding of sustainable wildlife management by reflecting not only population and habitat conservation, but also climate resilience, genetic diversity, ecological corridors, and integrated landscape and seascape approaches. Its objectives should also be supported by measurable ecological, social, economic, and governance indicators. Second, the guidance should be further strengthened by incorporating current scientific knowledge and evidence-based management approaches, while providing practical examples of community-based conservation and the implementation of traditional rights. In this regard, community participation and benefit sharing should not be interpreted as creating any automatic right to take, use, or trade wild fauna and flora. Emerging tools may also be reflected where appropriate. Third, safeguards should be strengthened to address ecosystem integrity, genetic diversity, ecological connectivity, climate adaptation, and human-wildlife conflict. Relevant risk assessments and practical measures should also be considered. Finally, the implementation section should be more operational by including performance indicators, adaptive management, and alignment as appropriate with the KMGBF, and national reporting processes. Consideration should also be given to innovative biodiversity financing, wildlife disease surveillance, One Health approaches, species recovery programs, and post-release monitoring. Indonesia further emphasizes that the guidance should remain voluntary, and utilization or movement of wild species should continue to be governed by national legislation, applicable CITES provisions, legality of origin, sustainability.
Merci à l'Indonésie.
Thank you, Indonesia. Now I give the floor to the DRC, followed by Gabon, then Guatemala. Thank you, Chair. I hope my microphone will be cut off. The DRC supports the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa Group. DRC is in the heart of the Congo Basin and is a mega diverse country. We have unique wildlife essential for planetary balance and the survival of our communities. In accordance with Decision 16/15, DRC reiterates its complete commitment to targets 4, 5, and 9 of the global framework. In order to make these ambitions a reality, our government has deployed major efforts. 1, legal reforms. DRC has just adopted a national forestry policy, and we are currently finalizing a national policy on wild animals, which integrates the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. 2, scientific monitoring. Our institutions are developing wildlife inventories based on rigorous factual data, and we are happy to announce that in July of 2026, a new species of monkey was discovered, new to science, native to DRC. This is the Colobus congoensis. Mr. Chair, DRC welcomes the draft guidance on sustainable wildlife management. However, we stress that this guidance must be based on an inclusive approach that respects legitimate traditional practices, and this guidance must avoid criminalizing livelihoods of indigenous peoples and local communities who depend on these resources. To conclude, Mr. Chair, the implementation of this guidance requires direct, predictable, and increased financial support, as well as effective technology transfer. Thank you. Thank you to the DRC for being within the time. Now I give the floor to Gabon, followed by Guatemala, and then Syria. Gabon has the floor. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Gabon supports the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Group of African States. Wildlife is without any doubt key elements of our planet's biodiversity. The services that wildlife provides are irreplaceable for the well-being of humanity. Sustainable management of this potential is therefore a priority. And we thank the Secretariat and all of the experts who have worked in this area. Effective management relies on proper understanding of this potential in terms of species, wild populations, threats, and possible changes in the future. This understanding, along with the BBNJ agreement, must go beyond national jurisdictions when it comes to marine areas. Thus, Mr. Chair, it would be desirable for a contact group to be established in order to delve deeper into ensuring that the draft guidance takes these fundamental issues into account. When it comes to the need to increase scientific research to have better understanding of wildlife, we must also focus on the consequences of the many conflicts that result from the occupation and use of spaces that are shared by wildlife and humans in many different parts of the world. Thank you, Kaban. I give the floor to Guatemala, followed by the Syrian Arab Republic, and then the Russian Federation. Guatemala has the floor. Thank you, Chair. Guatemala thanks the Secretariat and the experts who contributed to developing the global guidance on sustainable wildlife management. In Guatemala, the relationship between people and wildlife is both profound and historic. Indigenous peoples, local communities, and many rural sectors maintain cultural, spiritual, food, and economic links that are closely related to the use and sustainable management of wild species. Therefore, we particularly appreciate the recognition in the draft recommendation of the importance of integrating traditional knowledge, respecting the rights of indigenous peoples, and strengthening participatory governance mechanisms. We express our support to the draft recommendation and the adoption of the global guidance. We consider that these will contribute to strengthening conservation, sustainable use of biodiversity, and equitable participation in benefits, in line with the objectives of the CBD and the global biodiversity framework. We have made some contributions to the document in order to make it more concrete and practical for all parties involved in implementing this effort. And we will send our recommendations in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you, Guatemala.
Now I give the floor to Syria Arab Republic, followed by Russia Federation, and then Tanzania.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. تعرب الجمهورية العربية.
Thank you, Chair. We express our satisfaction with the efforts undertaken by the Secretariat to produce the draft recommendation on wildlife. We'd like to place an emphasis on the importance of applying the KMGBF in order to restore biological diversity. Biodiversity has suffered threats due to climate change, droughts, and other issues such as conflicts, which has led to an unsustainable use of wildlife. Given the document we are examining, we'd like to set out the following recommendations. We should integrate these guidelines into national plans and agricultural policies in particular. Syria is one country that does this to the letter in order to protect wildlife. Second, the sustainability of wildlife depends on support for rural communities. We have important projects in Syria involving tourism and other projects in order to strengthen the capacities of local communities. Given the scarcity of certain information, we often have to depend on the knowledge and monitoring provided by local communities. To conclude, the implementation of these guidelines in countries such as Syria requires considerable commitment in terms of financial support and capacity building. The microphone has been cut off.
Thank you, Syria, Arabia. Now I give the floor to Russia Federation, followed by Tanzania, and then Burundi. Russia Federation, you have the floor.
Distinguished Chair, this item on the agenda is an important element of work in the area of sustainable use of biodiversity, which we hope will be further developed in more detail in the framework of the convention in order to fully include it into practice in the principles of Addis Ababa. The Russian Federation notes that the presented guidance is voluntary, and this should be directly reflected in the title, in the annex, and in the text of the operative paragraphs. It must be clearly set out that the use of the guidance should be done with due regard for national conditions, characteristics, capabilities, and legislation. As a whole, in fact, this document is not general guidance on sustainable use of wild management for all, as it only sets out conditions for indigenous peoples and local communities. This very much limits the sphere of its application. Perhaps the document should be renamed and made into specifically guidance on taking into account the interests of indigenous people and local communities in order to ensure sustainable wildlife management. Adopting this guidance will only be possible after discussion of the annex in its text, to which there are many questions and edits. We will send our amendments in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Russia Federation, for saving time. Now I give the floor to Tanzania, followed by Burundi, and then Bahrain.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania supports the intervention made by Zimbabwe on behalf of African Group. Tanzania welcomes the draft global guidance on sustainable wildlife management and appreciates the extensive work undertaken by the Secretariat and partners in preparing this important document. The guidance provides valuable direction for advancing biodiversity conservation while promoting the sustainable use of wildlife and supporting the implementation of the key MGBF. Tanzania particularly welcomes the emphasis on inclusive decision-making, the integration of scientific and traditional knowledge, and equitable benefit sharing. We believe these are essential elements for effective and sustainable wildlife management. Tanzania also encourages further strengthening of provisions relating to community-based wildlife management, human-wildlife conflicts, capacity building, technology transfer, and predictable financial support for developing countries. We also emphasize that implementation should be undertaken in accordance with the national circumstances, priorities, and legislations. With these remarks, Tanzania supports the draft recommendations. I thank you, Chair.
Merci à la
Thank you to Tanzania. Now I give the floor to Burundi, followed by Bahrain, and then China. Burundi, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Burundi aligns itself with the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa Group. Sustainable wildlife management aims to ensure conservation of species, their sustainable use, and ensuring that ecosystem services can continue well. Contributing to socioeconomic development. When it comes to conserving species and ensure legal fragmentation of species, demographic pressure, agricultural expansion, invasive species, limited monitoring and research capacity, and limited financing. It's necessary to improve the management of our natural parks, restore degraded habitats, restore corridors, and establish management systems and plans for endangered species, ensuring proper use of non-timber forest resources, have proper monitoring of biodiversity and ecological monitoring, implement health initiatives under the One Health approach, build diagnostic capacity, and respond to zoonoses like mpox. As these are our priorities, we ask for institutional capacity building, sustainable financing, and modernizing of monitoring systems, as well as strengthening regional and international cooperation. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
Thank you, Burundi. Thank you for saving us time. Now I give the floor to Bahrain, followed by China, then Peru. Bahrain, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the Secretariat for their recommendations and this guidance. We participated in compiling the information on best practices. We support the draft recommendation with the following observations to make it more flexible. There's a repetition when it comes to free, prior and informed consent, and we would like to highlight this principle and its relation to national conditions to avoid making this a form of international calculation that could affect national conditions. Then, regarding environmental defenders, we see here that this has to do with legal rights, constitutional rights in each country. So we shouldn't expand the definition. Third, the standard governance system should take into account national legislation currently in force. As for equitable representation, we should stress the voluntary nature of these practices in order to respect each state. So we support cooperation with this guidance and other relevant conventions in order to strengthen technical and financial support, including within our region, in order to adapt with this guidance. We support the adoption of the guidance in accordance with the document we are considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahrain. Now I give the floor to China, followed by Peru, and then Ireland.
感谢主席。
Thank you, Chair. China supports the development of the global guidance, which covers multiple wildlife uses across ecosystems, effectively supporting the implementation of the relevant KMGBF targets, and China supports its overall framework. At the same time, in light of the CBD principles and national development realities, China proposes the following recommendations. First, we should clarify that this guidance is voluntary, non-binding reference tool, fully respecting national sovereignty. Second, we must adhere to country-led approaches, respect differing national circumstances and existing legal frameworks without adding burdens on developing countries. Third, we must distinguish between legal and illegal wildlife trade. We do not oppose use, but we must advocate for sustainable use. First, we support Brazil regarding point 4 of requesting the executive secretary. We must coordinate responsibilities across relevant MEAs and international organizations to ensure consistency and avoid duplication of work. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, China, for saving time. Now I give the floor to Peru, followed by Ireland, and then Panama. Peru, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. The delegation of Peru thanks the Secretariat for the work they have done to draw up this global guidance on the sustainable management of wildlife, and we appreciate the opportunity to have participated directly in the expert group. As a highly diverse country, Peru supports the adoption of the guidance, particularly given their voluntary nature and their ability to be adapted to the national circumstances and legislation of each country. We'd like to stress that this guidance complements state obligations under CITES without substituting these obligations or reinterpreting them. In the context of the implementation of CITES, Peru implements evidence-based systems in order to ensure proper traceability, in order to reflect the principles of sustainable management as well as precautionary principle. Likewise, we ask that the reference to free, prior, and informed consent be understood in the context of our national legislation when it comes to prior consultation, and that the consentment of implementation be in line with what is already foreseen in the Kunming-Montreal framework. Peru supports the statement made by Costa Rica. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Peru. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Ireland, followed by Panama and then Botswana.
Thank you, Chair. This is in addition to the statement already submitted. We thank Brazil for their proposal on this agenda item in their written statement. The proposal addresses the second objective of the Convention, which also, in our view, needs greater attention in the implementation of the CBD and the KMGBF. However, as it was submitted late and introduces an entirely new process on a new programme of work, we need much more time to consider it than is available at this meeting. Furthermore, we are of the view that introducing such a new programme of work on sustainable use goes beyond the mandate that SBSTTA has been given in Decision 1615 in relation to sustainable wildlife management. For these reasons, we do not think that this suggestion can be taken up by SBSTTA-28, and we are not in a position to support introducing this in the draft recommendation on sustainable wildlife management. Rather, we think that this suggestion on a new programme of work could be better considered in the context of COP17 Agenda Item 17 on areas of potential further work in the context of the framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Ireland, for saving time. Now I give the floor to Panama, followed by Botswana.
Thank you very much, Chair. Panama welcomes the work conducted and supports the adoption of these guidelines on wildlife, applied to multiple species and practices with particular attention to decision-making processes which should be inclusive and participatory, including different systems of knowledge and recognition of the distribution rights of costs and benefits. Panama aligns itself with the statement made by Brazil and hopes this can be formative work on wildlife. Sustainable use is one of the three goals of the Convention. Nevertheless, it remains to be undervalued and little developed in terms of the program work. In our experience, the Nature Pledge and PANA's commitment to nature, which sets out strategically our environmental commitments of the country and our work on Rio Conventions, we are mapping out a sustainable route in line with our National Action Plan, MBSAP, with our national economic plans in order to implement all of the elements of the Convention. Here we need greater support and technical assistance so that Panama can become an example which can be replicated by the rest of the states parties. In this regard, we also ask for fungal and microorganism biodiversity be recognized as integral components of sustainable management of wildlife and be considered consistently throughout the implementation of the guidelines. Panama welcomes recognition that this management needs to be along national circumstances and priorities, be participatory, We should also not ignore that we need active and full participation of academia and the scientific community at critical
my screen the last
statement submitted by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa Group and support the proposed guidelines. Natural resources management beneficiation, including from sustainable wildlife management, has been one of the cornerstones for development of the Southern African region, including Botswana, supporting its tourism industry, wildlife economy, and our community-based natural resource management, which we call CBNRM. Botswana enacted a new CBNRM legislation to create a conducive environment for local economies to thrive through the management of their natural resources by local communities, and also encouraging accountability and beneficiation. Botswana is also reviewing its Tourism Act as guided by a tourism master plan that promotes a diversification of our tourism product while still remains mainly wildlife-based. Botswana has been able to align to the KM-GBF targets 9 and 23 during the update of its NBSAP in partnership with UNEP. A biodiversity monitoring framework is also essential as we implement our NBSAPs and want to achieve our intended outcomes. Biodiversity financing remains a challenge to achieving comprehensive biodiversity conservation management. And Botswana, through the Biofin initiative in partnership with UNDP, encourage the participation of financial institutions in biodiversity conservation and management. I thank you.
Thank you, Botswana. Thank you for saving time. Dear colleagues, I have remaining on the list of speakers the following: IPLCs, youth, and IUCN. IPLCs, you have the floor, followed by youth, and then IUCN.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on the behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. IAB welcome the draft global guidance on sustainable management of wildlife. IAB strongly support the inclusion of the right-based approach, recognition the rights of indigenous peoples and local community across the all aspects of wildlife management with Article 8J, Article 10C, the KMGBF particularly target 22nd. IIB welcome the strengthened language and customary sustainable governance, customary tenure, and community-defined rules and inclusion of EFIC throughout the guidance. EFIC must apply not only the legislative and administrative measures, but also monitoring data collection, the use of traditional knowledge, emerging technology, and benefit sharing. Mr. Chair, sustainable wildlife management cannot be achieved without the recognition of the rights, roles, and contribution, knowledge system of indigenous peoples and local community. IIB urges parties to adopt a decision in regard to sustainable wildlife management, which is in strengthening the rights of indigenous peoples and local community, traditional knowledge, territories, and customary governance. The IAB stands ready to collaborate with the party and partner to ensure the right-based approach, culturally grounded and effective management of wildlife. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, IPLCs, for saving time. Now I give the floor to youth, followed by ICN.
Thank you, Chair. This statement is delivered on behalf of Global Youth Biodiversity Network, which is the international coordination platform for youth participation in Convention on Biological Diversity. We have submitted specific text proposal for this agenda item online, and we thank the parties who have expressed their support for these proposals. We are talking therefore to brief highlight our key priorities for this agenda item. GYBN welcomes the global guidance on sustainable wildlife management and supports its adoption. We particularly value its emphasis on inclusive governance, adaptive management, and recognition of traditional knowledge and the role of indigenous people and local communities, women, and youth. At the same time, the draft decision should better reflect the inclusive approach, underpinning the guidance by further incorporating international equity, intergenerational equity as a principle on sustainable wildlife management. We also recommend improvements to reference to promote responsive wildlife value chain and business-related activity through greater regulation, transparency, traceability, and due diligence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for saving time. Now the last is IUCN. IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. IUCN, as a member of CPW, welcomes the draft global guidance on sustainable wildlife management and supports its adoption to help parties advance implementation of targets 3, 5, and 9. IUCN's Sustainable Use and Livelihood Specialist Group has developed tools and guidelines for supporting sustainable wildlife management, which includes assessment of human health and animal welfare as recommended in the draft guidance. To complement this, IUCN is leading In Wild, a global initiative aiming to deliver standardized and scalable novel indicators on wildlife use and trade, drawing on online trade data and co-developed by policymakers, indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth. We invite parties to engage and join the In Wild stakeholder network. In addition, IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas is developing guidance on interpreting sustainable use within area-based conservation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, ICN. Thank you for saving time. Thank you, colleagues. We have completed the first reading of agenda item 6. After hearing your interventions, I propose to establish a contact group to further work on this issue. The contact group will be co-chaired by Ms. Leticia of South Africa and Ms. Carolina of Canada. I will recommend that the contact group work on the draft recommendations and the annex containing the guidance. I would like to request that you keep changes to the guidance to a minimum, considering that it was developing through a participatory process. I will count on the support of the co-chairs to strike a balance between progress on the draft recommendation and the annex. I wish to remind you that contact groups are open to participation by all parties. Other government and observers will also be able to participate unless otherwise decided by the co-chairs. The usual practice and rules will apply to participation of observers. They may speak at the discretion of the chair of co-chair. Any substantive proposal from an observer must be supported by at least one party. Thank you, colleagues. Now let's move to the next item, item 7. Scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the KMGBF strategic review of and update to the program of work on protected area. Dear colleagues, as I mentioned earlier, we now turn to the item 7, scientific and technical needs to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, strategic review of and update to the program of work on protected area. I now invite the Secretariat to the floor to introduce item 7. Please take your seat. S'il vous plaît, nous allons reprendre avec...
Please, we're going to resume with item 7. Please, and we've already begun, in fact. We're not going to resume. We've already begun going through item 7. We have little time, so please take your seats. Thank you for your understanding.
Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On item 7, the Secretariat has prepared document CBD/Substa/28/6/Rev.1, Scientific and Technical Needs to Support the Implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Strategic Review of and Update to the Programme of Work on Protected Areas. The strategic review and proposed update aims to align the Programme of Work with the targets of the framework, taking into account developments since the adoption of the Programme of Work in Decision 7/28. The subsidiary body is invited to consider the document and provide advice and recommendations as appropriate. In addition, the subsidiary body has before it Information Document 3, which provides a full analysis underpinning the strategic review and update process, including an analysis of submissions received. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Information Document 10 lists the 26 submissions received from parties and the 10 statements from observer on item 7 by the deadline. The list of parties and observer indicated in the information document is also being displayed on the screen. This list only includes observers that have registered on site. Given that the modalities were intending to save time, the parties and observers listed may wish to refrain from delivering an oral statement except where necessary to make clarifications. Parties and observers that did not submit written statement during the informal process may wish to request the floor and submit their written statement as per established procedures. Colleagues, are there any objections from any parties or observers listed in the information document to your statement being formally entered on record as statement officially submitted for this agenda item in this meeting? Please raise your hands if you have any objections. I see no objection. Thank you, colleagues. Your statement will be formally entered on record and considered as officially submitted under this agenda item. Regarding the statement submitted by observer, I will go through the list on the screen, one by one. Note that this list only includes observers Note that list only include observers that have registered on site. As I read the list, I will ask the representative on the observer organization to raise their hand so that we can confirm that you are in the room. I will then ask parties to press the microphone button if they support the statement made by that observer. I will read out the first three parties' names from the speakers list, and the Secretariat will capture the entire list and make it available on the meeting website as soon as possible after the end of the session. Okay, I will start with the first one. CMS Secretariat. CMS Secretariat, are you here? Yes, thank you. Any parties to support? Thank you. I can recognize Egypt, Panama, Dominican Republic, and the rest. Please, Secretariat can report. Juste pour rappeler.
Just to remind you, to remind the state parties to enable support for observers, we urge you that once you have pressed the microphone button, you allow time for the Secretariat to list you. To save on time, I'm not going to read out the entire list. I'll just read out the first three names, as I've said. And for the rest of the names, the Secretariat will take note. So please allow time for the Secretariat to take note. Please allow 30 seconds so that the Secretariat can have time to write these down.
Maintenant, je voudrais.
I would now like to ensure the EcoMaxi are in the room. Yes, they are. Are there parties which wish to support them? I see Morocco, Australia, DRC. For the rest, as I've just said, I will just ask the Secretariat to take note of those. Secretariat, you have 1 second to do so, please. I thank the Secretariat. Then we have Fungi Foundation. The Mushroom Foundation, I think. Fungi Foundation, are you in the room? Okay.
Merci.
Thank you. I see support from Chile, Egypt, Colombia. And for the rest, the Secretariat will take note. Secretariat, you okay? Okay. Then we have the Global Youth Biodiversity Initiative. Are you in the room? Okay, yes. Thank you. We have support from the Central African Republic, Panama, Cameroon. And for the others, Secretariat, please. Okay. The next on the list, I'll just read it in English.
National Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. Are you here? Okay, thank you. Any parties, any support? Okay. Nepal, Côte d'Ivoire, Colombia, and the rest, Secretariat. Now I can continue, maybe. The next ICN, are you here? I think so, yes. The support from Gabon, Paraguay, Congo. The rest, Secretariat. Now the next is Office of United Nations. High Commissioner, are you here? Okay, thank you. Any support? Panama. Thank you. The next, Nature Conservancy. Are you here? Okay, thank you. Any support? Gabon, Peru, Haiti. The next Secretariat. Thank you. The last one, not least, WW International. Are you here? Thank you. Support. The support from Gabon, Central African Republic, Nepal. The rest, Secretariat, please. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. I will now open the floor for intervention on item 7, beginning with parties speaking on behalf of a regional group. Please request the floor now only if you are speaking on behalf of a regional group. Only if you are speaking on behalf of a regional group. Thank you very much. I can recognize Brazil. The first will be Brazil, followed by Haiti, and then Zimbabwe. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delivering this statement on behalf of Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Panama, Uruguay, and Venezuela. We thank the Secretariat for the document CBD SBSTTA-28/6/Rev1 and welcomes the strategic review on the program of work on protected areas. We support its alignment with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, including broader consideration on protected and conserved areas, OACMs, and, where applicable, territories of indigenous peoples and local communities. We also welcome the stronger emphasis on effective management, equitable governance, biodiversity outcomes, and respect for rights. Our countries consider that ecological connectivity should not remain dispersed across several activities. It is a foundational condition for ecologically representative, well-connected, effectively managed, and equitably governed systems. It supports species movement, gene flow, ecological processes, biocultural diversity, ecosystem resilience, and climate adaptation across terrestrial, inland water, coastal and marine systems, including the integration of below-ground ecological processes as an essential component of ecological networks' integrity. For this reason, we support Brazil's proposal on the creation of a fifth program element on ecological connectivity. This element would provide a coherent structure for ecological networks, corridors, and other connectivity measures, while addressing governance, participation, rights, and adequate means of implementation. The ongoing IPES assessment on integrated biodiversity, inclusive spatial planning, and ecological connectivity further confirms the scientific relevance of this issue. Its findings, once approved, should inform the future development and monitoring of this program of work. Our country supports stronger synergies between the CBD and the Convention on Migratory Species in accordance with their respective mandates to promote complementarity, knowledge exchange, and coordinated action while avoiding duplication of work. We also support strengthening transboundary, cross-sector, and international cooperation. Updated activities should remain voluntary and non-prescriptive, respect national circumstances and legislation, and allow nationally appropriate approaches to monitoring structural and functional connectivity. We therefore invite SBSTTA to recommend the establishment of a fifth element in this program of work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. Thank you for time saving. Before I give the floor to IT, please allow me to remind some instruction. 4 minutes for parties speaking on behalf of region, 2 minutes for individual parties, 3 minutes for IPLCs and major stakeholder group, and 1 minute for non-party to the convention and other observer time permitting. Now I give the floor to IT. IT followed by Zimbabwe and then Vanuatu. IT, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. IT welcomes the update of the work program. It will allow to better align it with the KMGBF, in particular when it comes to Target 3, which aims to ensure by 2030 the conservation and effective management of 30% of terrestrial areas, marine areas, coastal areas, ensuring that they are, particularly those that are ecologically important, ensuring they're properly covered using effective measures based on the situation in each zone. However, we would like to ensure that achieving this ambition will have enough resources for the implementation, and the new guidance proposed does not have sufficient predictable, accessible financing and for scientific, technical, and institutional capacity strengthening for developing countries. Thus, it is of particular importance for Haiti to ensure that there's appropriate technology transfer and knowledge sharing, as well as good practices and sharing of experiences. These elements are essential to allow all countries, particularly SIDS, to efficiently implement the work program and to achieve the expected results. Haiti also believes that the specific needs of SIDS should be further taken into account, given how much they depend on marine ecosystems and coastal ecosystems and their level of vulnerability to climate change, as well as the fact that they often have limited capacity. Haiti takes this opportunity to welcome efforts made to strengthen synergies between the Biodiversity Convention and other relevant international instruments, including the BBNJ agreement, all within full respect of their respective mandates in order to have more coherent management of marine biodiversity and to strengthen international cooperation. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Haiti. Just to clarify, Haiti was speaking on behalf of small island developing states, is that correct? No, Haiti was speaking independently. I'm sorry, But according to the rules established, I said that for countries speaking on their own behalf, we would first give the floor to countries speaking on behalf of a group. And once we had finished with the country speaking on behalf of a group, we would then move to individual country statements. It's all right. We can accept things as they are, but I do urge the other countries, please, to follow those rules. Right now, it's only countries speaking on behalf of a group. The country speaking on their own behalf will come later. Thank you for your understanding. I give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Vanuatu and Saudi Arabia. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe is presenting this statement on behalf of the Africa Group. Africa welcomes the review and analysis of the program of work on protected areas and appreciates the efforts that have already shaped this document. We also welcome the update of relevant sections as outlined in CBD SBSTTA-28/6/Rev1, as the program of work remains catalytic in increasing the coverage of protected areas since inception. At our Africa Protected Area Congress held in Kigali in Rwanda in 2022, Africa adopted the Kigali Call to Action, a roadmap emphasizing inclusive governance, indigenous rights, and workable solutions to address the triple planetary crisis, including climate change. With the emerging scientific consensus on the role of wildlife in climate action, with protected areas being pivotal for wildlife conservation efforts, the strategic review of an update to the program of work on protected areas is timely. The integration of protected areas in inclusive spatial planning, consideration of climate change adaptation, mitigation in protected area planning and management is also important. The active participation of IPLCs and the integration of traditional knowledge in all processes remains critical. Chair, Africa's Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan for 2023 to 2030 demonstrates Africa's commitment to the critical role of ecologically protected and ecologically connected, protected and conserved areas to meet Africa's needs and our collective targets of the KMGBF. We also believe ecological connectivity and resilience is explicitly reflected in Goal A and targets 2, 3, and 12. It also underpins the achievement of targets 1, 4, 10, 11, and 14. This is why Africa is advancing Transfrontier Conservation Areas, or TFCAs, an initiative is a cross-cutting enabler as we work across international borders for GBF goals and targets, as well as for sustainable development goals. Africa is deliberately pursuing the strategic expansion of TFCAs and recognition of qualifying OECMs to provide complementary, scalable, and cost-effective approaches to increasing conserved and connected land and seascapes. Collectively, these mechanisms strengthen ecological connectivity, enhance ecosystem resilience, and also offer a practical pathway for Africa to achieve the 30 by 30 target while maximizing conservation outcomes across multiple land and seascapes. Finally, Chair, the draft global report on collective progress in the KMGBF, which was published, indicates that the world is not yet on track to achieve the framework's targets and accelerated implementation, and some innovation around OECMs is needed for Target 3 to be achieved. Africa Protected Area Directors Network and other sub-regional fora continue to facilitate sharing of experiences and advancing synergies that enhance collaborative work across the continent, drawing on best practices, diverse knowledge sources, and also findings from the recent IPBES assessment. Africa welcomes the draft decision in its current form as a good basis for discussion at this substa, and we remain committed to contribute to the discussion and share our specific text suggestions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. On behalf of Africa, thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Vanuatu.
Thank you, Chair. Vanuatu speaks for the 14 Pacific Island developing states. This item is a priority for our region. Target 3, the commitment to conserve at least 30% of land and sea by 2030 is, for the Pacific, both an ambition and an opportunity. The global report scores it at 0.38. Protected area and conserved areas, especially in the marine and coastal environments, are expanding, but other effective area-based conservation measures remain at and early states, and the equitable governance and recognition of indigenous and local territories are fully monitored. Globally, protected coverage stands at around 17.6% of land and just 8.4% of sea, meaning the world must roughly double terrestrial and triple marine coverage in the time remaining. This is precisely where the Pacific has the most to offer. Our locally managed marine areas and customary tenure systems are the archetype of the community-led equitable governed conservation that Target 3 was written to recognize. Across our region, communities steward vast areas of ocean through customary rules and traditional closures. This is not a promise for 2030. It is conservation already happening, delivered by the rightful custodians. Yet the world's tools do not yet count it. The category of other effective area-based conservation measures is barely used. Only a few thousands are recorded globally, and the system for recognizing indigenous and traditional territories remain weak. If Target 3 is measured only by formal state designated area protected areas, it will miss the very model that works best in our region, and it will undercount global progress. We therefore ask that the updated program of work on protected areas do four things. First, hardwire the recognition of indigenous and traditional territories and of other effective area-based conservation measures with genuine right-based governance and free, prior, and informed consent, so that community-led areas count on their own terms. Second, prioritize the quality of conservation, ecological connectivity, and real management effectiveness over headline area totals. A protected area that exists only on paper protects nothing. Third, ensure genuine marine representation in a program of work that has historically been terrestrial. For ocean states, that is essential. Fourth, we say this plainly, do not reopen the agreed text on Target 3. The target is settled, our task is to implement it, not to renegotiate ambition downward. Chair, the Pacific is not asking the world to conserve on our behalf. We are asking the world to recognize the conservation our communities already deliver and to build the rules of Target 3 around what actually works. I thank you, Chair.
Merci à Vanuatu.
Thank you, Vanuatu. If there are no further requests for the floor from regional groups, countries speaking on behalf of regional groups, I will open the floor for the parties, but I would once again like to ask for your indulgence. If you consider that you've made your statement by submitting it in advance, it's not really necessary to repeat it here unless there are specific points you'd like to make. And if you feel that your region has addressed the points that you wanted to make, then please, let's save some time so that we can discuss these points. If we don't save time, we'll end up losing time. So let's save time so we have time for discussions in the contact group. So now I would like to ask for your indulgence so that we can conclude all the sessions that we are supposed to have here. If you agree with me, we can be satisfied with the regional group declarations, and only if you really have particular points to add should you take the floor. Otherwise, we won't finish what's on our agenda. So I really ask for your indulgence to see whether we can do this. If you agree with me, for the countries who have already asked for the floor, if you agree with what I said, you can simply turn off your microphone. Thank you for your understanding.
Okay, now I open the floor for parties. Thank you. Can you allow me to close the list? Thank you very much. I will soon close the list of speakers after the first speakers. Now I give the floor to Russia Federation, followed by Saudi Arabia, and then DRC. Russia Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the continued work on analyzing and developing proposals on carrying out the program of work in particular areas of work of the Convention, bringing that in line with the GBF. When it comes to the program on protected areas, we have a number of additional proposals for actions. The document is proposing changes not just to the name of the program, but also a fundamental rebuilding of the entire system of terminology in this area, with unclear consequences for national systems and for the implementation of the GBF as a whole. If a new term is introduced into the convention, it should be defined directly in the draft decision. If conserved areas are just areas where OECMs are active, then we should simply say so, and only then can we make a decision about changing the name of the program. If conserved areas include something else, then that first needs to be worked through, and only then can we answer the question of changing the name and all of the consequences that could have. An alternative would be to include OECM directly in the name. In paragraph 6C, we feel it is unnecessary to have the list of elements. We feel that this is superfluous. In 6D, we don't think it's necessary at this time to refer to the need to adopt a decision at COP18. First, we need to see the outcomes and decide whether there will be material for a separate item on the agenda. And in the annex, we have many comments to make, and we are prepared to consider that within a contact group. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Russia Federation. As I said earlier, the colleagues, now the list of speakers is now closed. I give the floor to Saudi Arabia, followed by DRC, and then South Africa. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please allow me to extend my thanks to the Secretariat for preparing this document to underscore the importance of the program of work on protected and conserved areas. It supports the implementation of Target 3 of the KGF. The extension of conserved and protected areas must take into account national legislations and priorities. It must not focus on percentages and areas. It must focus on ecological connectivity and quality of governance. It must provide technical and financial support for the sustainable management of these areas. OECMs that are area-based must be taken into consideration based on clear criteria to ensure their effective contribution to conservation outcomes in line with national frameworks. In conclusion, we underscore the importance of respecting relevant traditional communities when designing and establishing these areas in accordance with national legislation. We underscore the importance of taking into consideration marine areas in respect of national sovereignty and national states' rights, and in such a way that ensures their sustainable use of their marine resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia, for saving time. Now I give the floor to DRC, followed by South Africa and then Nepal. DRC, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Chair. DRC supports the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa Group. Given the urgent need to achieve Target 3 of the GBF, DRC is no longer satisfied with just conserving small protected areas. We are redefining the Congo Basin's conservation architecture through connectivity, which is why we are proposing our flagship initiative, the Green Corridor Kivu-Kinshasa, which is the largest protected area in the world with community conservation. Mr. Chair, DRC will never cease to amaze the world. This mega environmental corridor is unique. It links the eastern forest and mountain areas from our country to the marshlands and savannas of the West. It's not just a matter of protecting emblematic species. It's also a matter of ensuring genetic flows, stabilizing the regional climate, and restoring areas that have been degraded at an unprecedented level. This program works on protected areas, and any such programs must ensure two main priorities. One, direct financing of environmental connectivity. Corridors shouldn't be the poor cousins of global financing mechanisms. They require appropriate financing and evaluation mechanisms. Two, support for integrated approaches between protected areas and OECMs. The Kivu-Kinshasa Green Corridor is based on just such a type of inclusive governance, highlighting the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities. And we urge SBSTA to support large corridors as an important pillar. The microphone has been cut off.
Merci à la.
Thank you, DRC. Now I give the floor to South Africa, followed by Nepal and India. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. South Africa supports the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of Africa. South Africa welcomes the strategic review of the program of work on protected areas and supports its update to ensure that it remains relevant and it effectively contributes to the implementation of the GBF, particularly Target 3. We support the broadening of the scope to include OECMs and indigenous and traditional territories. We also support its renaming to Program of Work on Protected and Conserved Areas. South Africa's approach to implementing Target 3 is guided by a commitment to balancing global ambition and practical, equitable, and sustainable implementation. The current baseline of protected and conserved areas stands at approximately 17% of terrestrial land area, comprising 10% in formal protected areas and an estimated 7% in conservation areas and OECMs. In the marine environment, South Africa has significantly expanded its conservation estates with approximately 15% of its exclusive economic zone now protected through a network of 42 marine protected areas. We have made some textual amendments to the draft recommendation, which we have annexed to this statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, South Africa, for time saving. Now I give the floor to Nepal, followed by India and then Indonesia. Nepal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Nepal supports adaptive and inclusive approach of protected area management that respond to emerging challenges, including climate change, habitat fragmentation, invasive alien species, and human-wildlife conflict. We also emphasize that effective protected area management can be further strengthened through enhanced transboundary cooperation, including in mountain and Himalayan regions. Nepal considers it important that the updated program of work reflects the diversity of national circumstances and provides sufficient flexibility for parties to determine the most appropriate pathways towards achieving Target 3. Subject to national context, greater emphasis should be placed on improving the effectiveness and equitable governance of existing protected and conserved areas, rather than focusing primarily on their expansion. While protected areas have made progress in advancing the implementation of OECMs, while parties, there is growing interest among non-governmental partners to contribute to this process. The updated program of work should therefore promote coordinated institutional mechanisms, technical support, and sustainable financing to accelerate OECM implementation. Finally, Nepal believes that the conservation success should be measured not only by ecological outcomes, but also by inclusive governance and improved livelihoods of the IPLCs, depending on such areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nepal. Thank you for saving time. Now, I would like to remind the parties on my screen. I have India, Indonesia, Argentina, Kenya, China, Bangladesh, Tanzania, Botswana, Bahrain. And observer, I have 2 IPLCs and youth. Now I give the floor to India. India, you have the floor, followed by Indonesia, and then Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. India welcomes the Secretariat's strategic review on scientific and technical needs to support implementation of KMGPF, particularly the proposed update of program on work on protected areas. India considers that the existing program of work remains a valuable framework for national implementation. At the same time, it should be updated to reflect the ambitions of the KMGPF Target 3, including appropriate recognition of OECMs and wherever applicable indigenous and traditional territories, consistent with the national circumstance and the rights of indigenous people and local community. The updated program should place greater emphasis on ecological integrity, connectivity, resilience, and measurable biodiversity outcomes across all ecosystems. We also underline the importance of practical scientific guidance on wildlife corridors, climate-informed corridors, design, and transboundary conservation supported by strengthened scientific and regional cooperation. India supports enhanced monitoring and evaluation, improved indicators, the use of new technologies, and strengthened capacity building and knowledge sharing for effective implementation. We also support practical guidance that promote integration of protected areas and into broader spatial planning while ensuring coherence with the related CBD process. India remains committed to working constructively with parties and Secretariat to finalize an updated program of work that is scientifically robust, implementation-oriented, and fully supportive of KMGPF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India, for saving time. Now I give the floor to Indonesia, followed by Argentina, and then Kenya. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia welcomes the strategic review of the program of work on protected area to better align with KMGPF. Indonesia wishes to highlight several overarching considerations. First, the update should fully reflect the principle of national sovereignty over national resources. Its implementation should remain consistent with national legislation, priorities, governance system, and national circumstances. Second, successful implementation will depend on adequate means of implementation, including predictable financial resources, capacity building, access to and transfer of technology, and strengthen technical and scientific cooperations. Third, Indonesia supports strengthening the scientific basis of protected and conserved area management while recognizing the scientific concept should remain sufficient, flexible to accommodate different ecological, geographical, and governance contexts. Finally, Indonesia emphasized the importance of promoting practical approaches that strengthen climate resilience, ecological connectivity, sustainable financing, and effective conservation outcomes while recognizing the diverse nation approaches adopted by parties. We look forward to engaging constructively with all parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Kenya, and then China. Argentina, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Argentina thanks the Secretariat for preparing the document, and we recognize that it is a timely moment to update the program of work on protected areas in line with the GBF. That said, we think that it's important to maintain the original mandate and to fully respect parties' competences when it comes to national policies and their implementation. So we feel that the update of the program is an opportunity to strengthen its implementation, but at this time, it's not necessary to expand its scope by including new thematic areas. Likewise, we see that the document identifies a number of conceptual and operational gaps with few clarifications on the modalities and criteria for their implementation. We feel any update must have sufficiently clear and applicable guidance, avoiding the program changing into a mainly conceptual exercise without operational tools. When it comes to the document, we feel it's important to use consistent language in line with what's been agreed upon by parties. In particular, it's necessary to avoid mentions to traditional territories where the content and scope of that term is not included in the convention. All references to territorial rights must be in line with previously agreed upon language. In addition, Argentina considers that it's necessary to clarify the modalities of relevant stakeholder participation in the process. Who exactly would these people be? And it's also important that any mechanism preserve the central role of parties. Those are the ones responsible for implementing the convention, and it must fully respect their ability to make programs as necessary. We will send our contributions in writing to contribute to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Kenya, followed by China, and then Bangladesh.
Thank
Kenya,
Chair.
you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya aligns with and supports the statement delivered by the Africa Group. As a mega-diverse nation, Kenya recognizes the immense contributions of the Program of Work on Protected Areas to wildlife conservation and community livelihoods. Kenya welcomes the ongoing efforts to renew and strengthen Protected Area Program of Work to accelerate progress towards achieving the KMGBF targets. Kenya recommends that parties review their national policies and strategies to incorporate emerging issues and ensure strict alignment with the KMGBF. Kenya takes note of the complementary activities in the annex. Crucially, this text reinforces conservation outside formal protected areas through wildlife corridors and also buffer zones. It also promotes inclusive conservation by ensuring the meaningful engagement of IPLCs, securing equitable benefit sharing, and supporting sustainable livelihood. Kenya emphasizes that ecological connectivity is a critical element for achieving effective conservation outcomes and should be integrated into the protected area work. Kenya recommends that the need for building stronger synergies across biomes and high priority ecosystems. In particular, we call for updating of PAUPA to align with ocean biodiversity processes, including coastal zones and areas beyond national jurisdiction, while enhancing the recognition of vulnerable terrestrial ecosystems and mountain ranges where transboundary cooperation and freshwater security are critical. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to China, followed by Bangladesh, and then Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. China supports the Secretariat in conducting the strategic review and analysis of the Program of Work on Protected Areas pursuant to Decision 16/12 in the context of KMGBF. We believe the Protected Area System provides a vital foundation for implementing Target 3 of the framework. Therefore, we need to focus on the quality, scientific assessment, ecological representation, connectivity, and management effectiveness. These updates should be country-led, respecting national circumstances and existing legal frameworks. Furthermore, we consider that protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures, OECMs, differ in definitions, scopes, and management objectives. Therefore, a clear distinction should be made between the two in a program of work, avoiding one-size-fits-all approach to standards, indicators, or management requirements. Differentiated contents and requirements should be proposed based on the nature and identification criteria of conserved areas. China stands ready to work with all parties to ensure the program of work effectively serves the implementation of the Target 3, enabling protected areas and OECMs, and fulfill our roles to enhance biodiversity conservation outcomes. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Bangladesh, followed by Tanzania, and then Botswana. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Bangladesh welcomes the strategic review and a proposed update of the program of work on protected areas. We propose that restoration activities under Target 2 explicitly recognize freshwater and riverine ecosystem, which are essential for biodiversity, ecological connectivity, and livelihoods in delta countries such as Bangladesh. Under Target 3, the program should recognize OECMs and community and co-managed protected areas implemented in accordance with national legislation and national circumstances. Bangladesh also emphasizes practical cooperation for transboundary ecosystem, particularly the Sundarbans, shared with our neighboring country, including joint management, monitoring, and financing. We support greater technical and financial assistance for expanding and effectively managing marine protected areas in the Bay of Bengal. Finally, biodiversity mainstreaming should be explicitly reflected under Target 14, and the updated program should align with national biodiversity strategies, supported by adequate finance, capacity building, and technical cooperation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Tanzania, followed by Botswana, and then Bahrain. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania thanks the Secretariat for the preparation of this agenda item. The United Republic of Tanzania supports the statement delivered by Zimbabwe on behalf of African Group. Tanzania welcomes the strategic review and updating the program of work to align with the KMGBF, particularly the Target 3. We support the proposed broader focus on the protected and conserved area is an important step toward strengthening biodiversity conservation. Chair, Tanzania wishes to emphasize the successful implementation of the updated program of work will require adequate financial resource, capacity building, technology transfer, and scientific and technical cooperation, particularly for developing countries. We encourage the stronger recognition of the community-based conservation approaches, freshwater ecosystem, ecological restoration, ecological connectivity, and application of innovative technologies to improve monitoring, management, effectiveness, and evidence-based decision-making. Furthermore, Tanzania supports strengthening regional and transboundary cooperation, including South-South collaboration to facilitate knowledge exchange and implementation of Target 3. Chair, Tanzania looks forward to constructive deliberation and remain committed to achieve an ambitious, practical, and implementable outcome that reflect national circumstance while advancing the objective of the GBF. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tanzania. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to Botswana, followed by Baron. Botswana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. Botswana aligned with the statement made by Zimbabwe on behalf of the Africa Group and with the Program of Work on Protected Areas. Aligning with Target 3 of conserving 30% of terrestrial and marine areas by 2030, the 30 by 30 target, Botswana has already surpassed this by 10%, shifting focus to monetize its protected assets. Botswana enacted the Forest and Range Resources Bill in 2025, merging 3 outdated acts into a modern law to strengthen sustainable management of Botswana's forest and range ecosystems, including 6 forest reserves. Botswana has been one of the pioneers of the Transfrontier Conservation Area in the Southern African region and aligns with the principles of ecosystem integrity and connectivity. Botswana is a party to 3 TFCAs and has worked with all the partners to promote transboundary resource management and developing instruments to achieve these. These initiatives demonstrate strong regional cooperation and sustainable conservation financing. Botswana emphasizes managing its spatial planning according to the approved National Spatial Planning Plan to avoid expansion of other land uses that may encroach into the protected areas and cause human-wildlife conflicts. Botswana has successfully developed a human-wildlife conflict management strategy. Botswana also recognized the UNESCO and Ramsar sites, such as the Okavango Delta, in promoting ecosystem integrity and connectivity. Botswana remains committed to the cause. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Botswana. Thank you for saving time. Now, I give the floor to Bahrain. Bahrain, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, at the outset, please allow me to extend my appreciation to the Secretariat for its valuable analysis in preparing this strategic review. We also welcome the gradual updating of the program of work to maintain its methodology and structure instead of engaging in a comprehensive updating that will prolong negotiations. I would like to note the following in this context. First, on the terminology that are repeatedly used in the text, mainly in relation to indigenous and traditional territories. This concept is used in a legal and historical context that differ from one region to another. In our opinion, it's very important for parties to have the necessary flexibility to implement this terminology in accordance with their national laws, legislation, and in accordance with the Principle 8 of the Convention, mainly doing this within the available resources. I mentioned paragraph 12 mainly with respect to target 3. Maybe we should include a structure such as in accordance with the national and legal context of every party. There are several references to the free, prior, and informed consent, mainly in this text. In this context, we would like to reiterate that this principle is inspired from the UNDRIP, and it's not a legally binding document. We believe that we should keep this terminology illustrative, non-prescriptive, and encouraging. We should not get into details, and the wording must not be prescriptive and that must not go beyond the obligations under the convention. On the supplementary activities, mainly with respect to the empowerment to allowing companies to carry out assessment, the microphone was cut off.
Thank you, Baran. Dear colleagues, I have the following remaining on the list of speakers. I can recognize IPLCs and youth. I give the floor to the IPLCs, followed by youth. IPLCs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. The adoption of the KMGBF marked a turning point in recognition of the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities and their roles and contributions to achieving the objectives, goals, and targets of the CBD and its strategic plan. The science is clear. Many assessments and studies confirm that lands, waters, and territories of IPs and LCs are the most effective in maintaining biological diversity and ecological integrity. First, coverage should reflect the broader scope of Target 3 by including indigenous and traditional territories, whether officially recognized or not, as well as their diverse governance systems and types. The updated program of work shall be complementary and not run counter to the ITT guidelines being developed by SPHA. Second, the characterization of IPs and LCs as mere beneficiaries of protected areas has to change. It is clear that IPs and LCs should have an active role in the establishment and governance of conservation areas. Overlaps of these areas with ITTs have to be addressed, especially where there is no consent, and in addition, IP and LC governance must be restored. Third, the program of work should apply a human rights-based approach, respecting the respective rights of IPs and LCs contained in international instruments, including the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and Human Rights Law. Fourth, we support a differentiated approach to Indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation and initial contact, which should be in line with international principles of no contact, intangibility, and precaution. Fifth, we reaffirm that direct and accessible funding for IPs and LCs is essential for effective, inclusive, and rights-based implementation. Finally, all elements of Target 22 need to be reflected in the activities, including access to justice and information, and the full protection of environmental human rights defenders. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IPLCs. Thank you for saving time. Now I give the floor to youth. Youth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This statement is delivered on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We are taking the floor to briefly highlight our key priorities for this agenda item. As we update the program of work on protected areas, we must ensure it strongly reflects the commitments in the KMGBF on a human right-based approach, inclusive participation, access to justice and information, intergenerational equity, and recognizing indigenous and traditional territories. Crucially, Target 22 do cannot be met without guaranteeing access to justice in the context of protected and conserved areas through effective and accessible grievance and redress mechanisms alongside the full protection of environmental human rights defenders. Furthermore, scaling up resources must never come at the expense of human rights. We propose explicit text requiring environmental and social safeguards for all funding mechanisms, in addition to direct, accessible funding for indigenous peoples, local communities, women, and youth. Finally, monitoring systems must evaluate governance, quality, equity, and socioeconomic outcomes. This requires integrating age and gender disaggregated indicators and ensuring inclusive and participatory monitoring. We call on parties to ensure these aspects during deliberations of an equitable and effective program of work on protected and conserved areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for saving time. Thank you, colleagues. We have completed the first reading of agenda item 7. Distinguished delegates, I have taken note of the extensive discussion on this matter. Accordingly, I will establish a contact group to be co-chaired by Ms. Adèle Fardo of France and Ms. Ruiana of Indonesia. Details regarding the timing and organization of the group's work will be communicated in due course. I wish to remind you that contact groups are open to participation by all parties. Other government and observers will also be able to participate unless otherwise decided by the co-chair. The usual practice and rules will apply to participation of observers. They may speak at the discretion of the chair or co-chairs. Any substantive proposal from an observer must be supported by at least one party. Dear colleagues, before I close the session for the day, I will give the floor to the Secretariat for any announcement. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Dear delegates, just information on the contact groups for the rest of the day. The contact group on item 8 on marine and coastal biodiversity will take place at 3 p.m. in room CR3/4, which is behind us. The contact group on synthetic biology, item 5, will take place at 7 p.m. in the same room CR3/4, and the contact group at 7 p.m. And the contact group on sustainable wildlife management will take place at 9 p.m. in conference room 1, CR1, which is across the way. The restaurant that remains open until 9:30. There's one restaurant that remains open until 9:30 is the River Cafe in that direction. There are signs that lead you there. It's in the new gray block. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. With that, colleagues, I will close this session and pay close attention to the schedule for the time and place that contact group will meet and the date and time of the next meeting of our plenary.